Well, we have to admit that healthcare is a business in America. In fact, there are vested interests in this business of healthcare. It's a $2.7 trillion a year medical industrial complex we have in America.
The cancer medical complex is this whole monolith that's been set up to make money on cancer. And so let's take the woman who is a young woman who's been feeling a breast lump, goes to her doctor, she goes for a mammogram, they pick up something, she's going to go for a biopsy, they pick up something, now she's going to go for an excision, tell her she's got cancer, she's going to get chemo and radiation. It's this whole system set up to treat cancer, and it's a multi-trillion-dollar industry right now. And the problem is people aren't living longer from these therapies.
This cancer industrial complex that Dr. Brownstein just mentioned, where only certain approved treatments are covered by insurance, is alive and well in the United States. But it's not just here in the United States. This is a global thing. Let's listen to Ard Pisa describe the state of affairs in Holland.
It is by law arranged in Holland that a doctor must give chemo, radiation, and surgery, but no natural treatments not allowed in Holland.
Oh, natural treatments are not allowed?
No. You are going tomorrow to Keulen to Professor Dr. Robert Kort at the Medical Center Cologne.
Yeah.
You can't open the doors for a medical center in Holland like that one. It isn't allowed in Holland.
Well, I mean, I guess at least people in Holland have access to go to the clinic in Germany. It's close.
Yeah, it's close, but you have to pay for yourself, and that's a big problem.
Okay. Insurance doesn't cover it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Here in Holland, they pay insurance for chemo, €50,000, but €30,000 for a natural treatment in Germany, they won't pay it.
Wow.
It's crazy. It's the world upside down.
I agree with Ard Pisa. The world is upside down. And a prime example of this upside down world is in our food supply. Did you know that there are certain substances that may be in popular foods like, say, Chinese food, that literally excite brain cells to death? They're called excitotoxins. And in this next clip, Dr. Russell Blaylock, who is a neurosurgeon and a scientist, describes the role of glutamate in producing and feeding cancer.
Well, MSG is monosodium glutamate. It's just a salt of glutamate. The damaging element is the glutamate, not the monosodium. You forget that. Anything that says glutamate is an excitotoxin. That means it can destroy brain cells. Now, when I did most of my research and writing about excitotoxins, it had to do with the brain, because that's where we thought all the glutamate receptors were. Now we found out that actually there's glutamate receptors in every cell in the body. Not a single cell doesn't have glutamate receptors. What that means is, if you eat glutamate, now you don't have a blood-brain barrier to even consider protecting you, because glutamate goes to all these cells without any interference. And your blood level rises very rapidly and very high for over a prolonged period of time. Humans have a higher and more persisting level of glutamate in their blood than any animal that you experiment on. Well, the second thing, once they found out there are glutamate receptors everywhere, is they found out glutamate receptors trigger and stimulate the growth and invasion of cancers of every kind. First, they thought it was brain tumors only. And they demonstrated that if you had high glutamate levels around the tumor became highly invasive and grew twice as fast as a tumor that had low glutamate levels. Then they started looking at other tumors, lung tumors, colon cancer, breast cancer, prostate cancer, thyroid cancers. Every cancer they looked at, they found the same thing. Glutamate acted as a fertilizer, if you will, a stimulant for the growth of that cancer. Made it grow extremely fast, made it highly invasive, and less likely to be cured. Now, the research has continued, and we're finding that more and more. Now, the second corollary is that if you block the glutamate receptor, the tumor starts slowing its growth. It becomes less invasive. And the tumors will start dying. The cells start dying. It has no negative effect on normal cells. So if you block the glutamate, normal cells reproduce, function just fine. It's only the cancer cell that starts dying when you start blocking your glutamate receptor. And then they found, well, if you take a patient who's getting chemotherapy and you give them these glutamate blockers, the chemotherapy works a lot better.
Wow. So you can take it along with the
can take it
chemo.
along with it.
Because I know a lot of people that are watching are on chemo now.
Right. So this is a really hot area of research. The big question is, you don't want to block all glutamate receptors because the brain needs them for its function. You wouldn't be able to remember, you fall into a coma. So you want to do a selective way to cut down that glutamate production. Well, there's an enzyme in your cells called glutaminase, and its function is to convert glutamine into glutamate. And that's how that cancer cell starts producing lots of glutamate. And if you block that enzyme, this tumor starts shrinking.
Are there natural glutamate blockers that we should be familiar with?
Fortunately, there's a lot of them.
Okay.
Virtually all your flavonoids that I've discussed, curcumin, quercetin, ellagic acid, resveratrol, anthocyanins, they all reduce glutamate receptor activity. And that's their advantage. And they do it safely. So that the brain can function normally, but the cancer can't use it.
Fascinating information from Dr. Blaylock that glutamate actually acts as a fertilizer for cancer cells. And I thought it was really interesting what he said. It's not the monosodium. You know, most people have heard of MSG, monosodium glutamate. It's not the monosodium part that's the problem. It's the glutamate. And there's many different types of glutamate. Let's listen to some more from Dr. Blaylock as he shares.
Cancer cells use two major fuels.
Okay.
They use glucose and they use glutamine. Of the two,
Sugar.
glutamine is a more powerful stimulant for cancer cell growth.
Okay.
And
So we hear that, watch out for sugar, glucose, because cancer cells do feed on it, but you're saying glutamine is worse.
yeah, because the Warburg effect is the fact that normal cells use both anaerobic and aerobic system, the Krebs cycle. Cancer cells only use the anaerobic system. It was thought. Glutamine can work the aerobic system and produce a lot more energy. So if you eat a lot of sugar and you eat a lot of glutamine, you're really stimulating your cancer powerfully. And so the idea is you want to cut down on your glutamine intake. Well, a lot of people are promoting glutamine as a way to heal the gut, leaky gut syndrome. And so they're saying take 5, 6, 10 grams of glutamine. That is a powerful stimulant for degenerative brain disorders, a powerful stimulant for cancer growth. So you don't want to do that. There's a lot better ways to repair the GI tract that work better and safer and actually inhibit cancer.
But not glutamine.
But not glutamine. The other thing is foods, for instance, beans like black beans are high in glutamine. Mushrooms are high in glutamine. So these foods that are high in glutamine, you don't want to eat either. You want to try to eat only low glutamine foods, and a lot of those are your vegetables. And some cancer researchers think, well, this may be why people who are on vegetarian diets and juicing seem to have these spontaneous cures of their cancer, is because they have such a low glutamine intake and a low sugar intake.
Wow.
Both.
So they're getting rid of the two fuels.
You're getting rid of two fuels. Now, cancer cannot use fat for its fuel. So coconut oil is a good way to keep your energy up without having to resort to sugar, and cancer can't use it.
MSG is one form of glutamate. What are some other sources of glutamate to avoid?
Well, the industry, really got hammered when my book Excitotoxin came out, and everybody was looking at glutamate, and so they started taking MSG off the label, and they even put on the label contains no MSG, and then they put sources of glutamate in it, like hydrolyzed protein, soy protein isolate, soy protein concentrate, autolyzed yeast, caseinate is a very common one. All of those are extremely high in glutamate, but the law allows them to put those in the foods and still put on the label contains no MSG.
Because they're not monosodium glutamate.
Monosodium glutamate, but they're just as dangerous and harmful as monosodium glutamate.
So you're going to watch out for all the forms of glutamate.
All the forms of glutamate, and particularly soy. Soy is naturally high in glutamate and glutamine, as well as aluminum and fluoride and manganese.
Wow.
It's got a lot of toxins in it. Soy is a very bad food, and particularly a liquid food. If you get it in milk and soy liquid products, it's very high glutamate levels. Your blood level will rise as much as 20-fold to 50-fold.
And that's even if it's organic soy, right?
Doesn't make any difference. It's natural to the plant, And in my estimation, people shouldn't be consuming soy products.
Dr. Blaylock mentioned that glutamate is not only a fuel, but it's also a fertilizer for cancer cells. Now, when you hear fuel for cancer, most people who have been paying attention thus far in the series are going to say sugar. And sugar is something that we must address. Sugar is one of the primary fuels for cancer. In this next clip, we listen to a scientist describe what we need to really look out for when it comes to sugar. Are all sugars bad? Or are there certain things that we need to look for as far as sugar is concerned? Potentially the spikes of sugar, the glycemic index. What is it that we need to look out for in order to avoid sugar fueling cancer cells?
The question then becomes, from practical perspective, what is a cancer patient to do? Should they not eat sugar? Should they eat sugar? The good thing there is that the source of sugar matters. You know, how you're eating your sugar makes a difference. Today, if you look at the patterns of sugar eating back in the 1960s, most of our sugar came from sugar cane. And that sugar cane, if you look at what it's made of, it is mostly sucrose. So it is 50% glucose, 50% fructose. Over time, what has happened is that high fructose corn syrup has kind of caught up with it. There are a lot of indications to show that high fructose corn syrup has got several negative health effects. Inside cancer, there's a processing center for glucose. And inside any cell, there's always a processing center for glucose. They're what we call the hexokinase receptors, HK2, so to speak, in cancer cells, and in normal cells as well. The only difference is that there are way more HK2s in cancer cells than they are in regular cells. And the problem that happens is that now you've got a hungry dog out here, and you've got a dog that is not so hungry that will get satiated easily, and you have a sudden spike of sugar. Guess what? The hungry dog is going to overfeed on that sugar. So what we really are looking to do is to stop the spikes of sugar. That's why we're looking to give people diets that have got a low glycemic index. A lot of people think, okay, fruits and vegetables, that is something that we recommend at Hope for Cancer, that, cancer patients should eat fruits and vegetables. A lot of people think, oh my God, fruits and vegetables are so high in sugar. Oh, how is that going to affect our cancer cells? The answer lies really in not so much the composition of the sugar itself, but in how it is delivered. So in the case of sugars, if you look at the balance of what content most fruits have, it's different. Some fruits have got a higher level of fructose, some fruits have got a higher level of glucose, some of them have sucrose, so you have various varieties. Apples, pears, they're pretty good to eat because they've got a relatively higher fraction of fructose to glucose, but they have both. They have sucrose as well. But they also have a lot of fiber with them. So when you're eating them, what the fiber does is that it slows down the absorption of the sugars into the body, and that makes sure that you're not going through those incredible spikes that are causing the absorption of the sugars into the cancer cells, which then feeds into their mechanism of growth, because the more sugar they get, the more they can grow and they can replicate themselves.
Okay. So just to reiterate, what we have to watch out for are the sugar spikes. And what might cause those sugar spikes? It's the man-made processed sugars, the candies, the sweets. But we also have to watch out for sugar's effect on the immune system.
Sugar really impairs the immune system. In fact, in the 1970s, there was a scientist named John Ellie. And John actually, what he did, Dr. Ellie, he actually looked in detail at what happens, how do white blood cells run? What's different about white blood cells than normal cells? And what he found was that white blood cells actually need 20 times more vitamin C than normal cells. Now, he also looked at what's the pathway for white blood cells to get the vitamin C that they need, because we know vitamin C is an antioxidant, protects the white blood cells from oxidative stress. And of course, most of your listeners, most people should know white blood cells are kind of like your military, right? So they're going out and they're fighting wars every single day, and so they need a lot of protection. So how does the vitamin C actually get into the white blood cell? That's the question. And what he found was that it goes through the same pathway that sugar or glucose gets into the cell, through insulin. And so what that means is when blood sugar elevates, our body naturally produces this hormone called insulin. Insulin takes the sugar, puts it into the cell where it belongs. And so what we know is that cells, including white blood cells, they have a greater affinity for glucose. The insulin receptor itself has a greater affinity for glucose than it does vitamin C. And so what that actually means is that when blood sugar is elevated, we are unable to get the vitamin C into the cell. And so there's something that Dr. LA came up with. It was called the